So that was it. That was my time as Scottish Book Trust's virtual writer in residence. And there's only one task left for me to do really, which is to hand over to your brand new virtual writer in residence. But before I do that, just a few thank yous, if that's okay. First of all, I think the most important people to thank are yourselves. Thank you to you lot for joining in and for supporting what has been the world's first virtual writer in residence project. Don't believe what other people tell you. This was the genuine original. This was the first, dreamed up by those clever people, Anna Gibbons and the rest of them at Scottish Book Trust. So thank you for joining in and taking part and making it the success it has been. Thank you also to the writers. That's Anthony McGowan, Ali Kennan, Marcus Sedgwick, Julie Britannia and Melvin Burgess, who provided brand new short stories for us to include as part of the project on the Scottish Book Trust website. If you enjoyed the stories, please do go and look out for their books as well. You'll enjoy those too, I'm sure. Thank you to the librarians and to the teachers who have shown the podcasts, the creative writing podcasts, who've shown them in lessons or at school, and who's actually prodded and poked and cajoled you lot into joining in our creative writing competition. It was a great competition. We had entries not just from all over Scotland, but from all over Britain, and even from mainland Europe as well. So thank you all for joining in. I'm really sorry you couldn't all win, but we really enjoyed looking through all the entries, reading everybody's short stories, some fabulous imaginations out there, and some cracking young writers of the future, that's for sure. The best ones, the pick of the bunch, the top 11, we published in this book. And this book, it now sits on a shelf in the National Library of Scotland, not very far away from Scott and Stevenson and Rankin and Rowland, and even Burns and Banks and Bissett and Brookmeyer. It's just a spitting distance away from those writers. Out of the 11 winners, what we've also done is chosen four people, four of our favourite young writers, who've actually gone onto a mentoring scheme with me. They're writing their first novels, their debut novels, and I'm taking them through the writing process. They're meeting agents, literary agents, to find out how that side of the industry works. And we're also taking them down to London to meet Scholastic Publishing, so they can talk to editors and book designers and publicists, just to see how the whole of the industry works. So we've done quite a lot in this past year. Thanks to everybody for joining in. I say now, what we really need is a drum roll, so that I can hand over to the new virtual writer in residence. The much acclaimed author, the prize-winning author from Glasgow, author of books such as Scars and Fat Boy Swim and The Drowning Pond and Loser. I'd like to introduce you to Cathy Forde.
Thanks very much, Keith, and hello. Thank you very much for allowing me to be the second virtual writer in residence for the Scottish Book Trust. I don't know what size of shoes Keith wears, but I know they're going to be very, very big ones to fill, succeeding what he's done, and also trying to add some more to the information he gave in his fantastic podcasts, which I've watched and probably I've stolen lots and lots of ideas from in things that I've written over the last year. What my plan is over the next year is to actually try and help, in the majority, the boys and girls who, they're in my mind when I'm going to be sort of talking about creative writing. I'm going to be thinking of all the boys and girls who tell me they find it really, really hard to come up with ideas for stories, and they just don't seem to feel inspired. And the tasks that I'm going to present over the next few months, there's going to be 6 of them again, and the first one will be coming up shortly. They're all going to be based on very sort of simple ideas and simple beginnings, and some of them I'm hoping will actually lead to stories in themselves, but added together, they should provide the ingredients for short story writing, novel writing, and just kind of general creativity. So I'm looking forward to getting started. Lots of you will have looked at Keith's podcast over the last year, and I hope you continue to do so, because they're still going to be available on the Scottish Book Trust website. You'll also, over the course of the year, be able to look at the podcasts that I'm going to make, and of course if you get fed up looking at me, you can go back to Keith. What you'll find is that there is going to be quite a bit of overlap in some of the things we talk about, because basically the two of us are writing stories, and I'm sure there's lots and lots of things that we approach in the same way. However, the things that I'm going to talk about are things that I've learned over the last 12, 13 years of writing, and none of them are things that I actually knew I would be doing as a writer when I started writing. They're things that I've learned along the way. Some of them must work because I've managed to get my books published, so they actually are tips that you can put into practice, particularly if you want to be a writer. I'm going to outline 6 different tasks in each of the podcasts, and they all add up actually to the kind of things that I would put in one of my own stories, but they're all quite different. The first task is really, really easy. In fact, it's only one line I'm going to ask you to write. It's the first line of a story, and that's going to be how we start off. I'm going to set another task as an extension to that if you find the first task too easy and too boring, but I'll be explaining all that in the actual podcast for the first task. The second and third tasks are going to look at how we create characters and where we get characters from. And we're going to be looking at people we know. We're going to actually be stealing bits and pieces of people we know in the creation of those characters. And the task after that is going to be giving those characters a voice, trying to make them speak realistically and convincingly. That is really, really important when you're writing a story. The fourth task we're going to look at is to do with the senses. We're going to look at how things we see, things we hear, things we feel, and how things we can even touch are important in the stories we write. And we're actually literally going to go on a journey and try and consider how the senses can build atmosphere into a story. The next task after that is going to actually be a slight detour, because we're going to look at something that you normally wouldn't expect to find in a creative writing workshop. We're going to look at music and think about how music and soundtracks play a part in creating atmosphere in stories. And we're also going to try and think about the kind of soundtracks that our characters would listen to. That's something that I do a lot in my own books, and it seems to work. The final task, and you'll probably be glad to come to an end of all of these tasks, the final task is going to be actually looking at endings. And I know that I find endings quite hard to write, and also quite hard to talk about writing. How do you find the ending to your story? Where does it come from? Where do you know when to end a story? That's actually something that lots of people ask me about. Young writers find it hard too. And we're going to talk to writers and see what they do, what their strategy is, and if they find endings difficult or hard to write about. So that's the 6 tasks, and I hope that you'll stay with me and enjoy the podcast and end up as a brilliant writer. All these tasks, if you follow them and if they help you to write, might encourage you to enter the short story competition that the Scottish Book Trust is going to be running all through this year, with a closing date next spring. If you go onto the Scottish Book Trust website, you'll find all the details, and I hope that as many of you, as big numbers of you entered last year, and I hope as many of you will enter this year.